Yes, this is an island surrounded by water, big water, ocean water. Trust me, I'm like a smart person. I'm very consistent. I'm a very stable genius. I had the best words. Tolerate it. I know words. Mike Pounds. I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges of the investigation. But there's no better word than stupid. Anonymous, really anonymous. I'm very highly educated. One of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water. Had the best words. God bless the United States.
Around the nation, CYT Nation, you guys know what time it is. We got a great show for you guys today. We got a lot of things to talk about. We have, of course, Michael Bloomberg. Oh, some disastrous stuff about Michael Bloomberg. Thanks, of course, to a good friend of the show, Benjamin Dixon, and some very terrible interviews, very terrible audio from Mr. Bloomberg. We're going to talk about that. We also have Donald Trump messing up on his tweets. That's fun. But mostly we're going to talk about the Democrats. We've got Chuck Todd in a little bit of trouble. We've got Joe Biden calling people dog-faced pony soldiers. It's crazy stuff. We got a Buttigieg staffer harassing people at the rallies, at Buttigieg rallies. We got a big news day. And not only that, New Hampshire primary is happening literally right this minute. And so, look, we're all on pins and needles trying to figure out what's going to happen. MSNBC is already downplaying Bernie Sanders. I wish I had the video of that already because, here you've got everybody on cable news essentially saying, and he's the Bernie Sanders. I mean, even if he wins, he's kind of losing anyway. I just saw a video of Lawrence O'Donnell talking about, when he was running in 2016, he won by 60% of the vote in New Hampshire. He's at half his support. He'd probably win, but he's lost so much support because it went to everybody else. That's because at this point in time, there were literally like two people running in 2016. They will do everything they can to minimize Senator Bernie Sanders because they despise him. And of course, the Chuck Todd story, I'll probably get into that more during that story, but the hate is palpable in the air when it comes to MSNBC, when it comes to these establishment figures, establishment media especially, their hatred against Bernie Sanders. Jesus. Don't watch MSNBC anymore. Again, it's a wasteland. And by the way, there was something good that came out of this. And I wish I had the video for this as well. But here you had an interview with somebody. You know how media does like these interviews in diners and everything? Well, they were doing one in New Hampshire. And there was a woman. She's like, I support Bernie Sanders. You want to know why? MSNBC. And the guy's like, oh, do tell. And she cited the fact that MSNBC is so incredibly hostile to Bernie that it basically didn't force her, right? It convinced her, like, you know what? I'm gonna go vote for Bernie. You guys are so against him that I had to see what it was about. And now I know. And now I'm in favor of Bernie. Oh, awesome. So you know what I'm going to call that, by the way? Because I think we're going to see more of that. where I'm going to call it the MSNBC effect, where MSNBC's open hostility to Bernie Sanders makes people look into his actual policies, into his past, to see what's so bad, right, about him, to see what he actually believes. And that gets people to support Bernie Sanders because of the unfair tax, the MSNBC effect. I've coined it, hashtag trademark MSNBC effect. Okay, anyway, so let's get into the stories. We'll start out with some disaster for both Michael Bloomberg and Donald Trump. That's always fun. Okay. Now, President Donald Trump was getting wrecked online after he tweeted, then quickly deleted, a post showing video of Michael Bloomberg. Now, Mike Bloomberg is the former mayor of New York City, and he was caught on video defending the very racist stop and frisk policy. So first, I want to show you that video, and then we'll get to Trump's tweet.
They just keep saying, oh, it's a disproportionate percentage of a particular ethnic group. That may be, but it's not a disproportionate percentage of those who witnesses and victims describe as committing the murder. In that case, incidentally, I think we disproportionately stop whites too much and minorities too little.
Oh man, look, that's a disaster. Oh, we stop white people too much and minorities too little. Michael Bloomberg, right there. And that's not the only video, of course. There's plenty of other video where that comes from. But Trump couldn't help himself. See, he hates Michael Bloomberg. He hates Michael Bloomberg because Bloomberg is richer than he is. And so he's gone to calling him Mini Mike, right? Especially since Michael Bloomberg has been running, he's taken out hundreds of millions of dollars in ad buys. And so all of his ads are basically him making fun of Donald Trump, as well as having, dancing gingerbread man. It's the weirdest stuff, right? It's like a college student just learning how to edit and being like, you know what would be cool? If I were to throw a dancing gingerbread man in one of my videos. But some of his actual campaign ads, though, are pretty vicious, basically fat shaming the president. And so we've got that. Now, Trump, again, couldn't help but get angry, right? And so he goes and he takes this video of Bloomberg being obviously racist and then added, quote, "You're a total racist. Bloomberg's total racist." Now, people could not help but see the irony of this. So I want to give you some of the fun responses here. Panbills says, "Hey, Donald Trump, why did you delete your tweet calling Bloomberg a racist?" Mama Bear asks, or says, "The guy who called Mexicans rapists, the guy who denied housing to black and brown people, the guy who called black nations shitholes, the guy who says black voters have nothing to lose, that guy is calling Mike Bloomberg racist." I mean, really? It's kind of like pot calling kettle black. And so it is kind of hilarious. Now, Mattheos says, if Bloomberg is a racist and so is Trump, all the conservatives attacking Bloomberg are complete idiots. Yeah. Well, they're trying to say, oh, no, we're not the racist party. What are you talking about? Yeah, actually you are. I mean, it's based in your policies and it's based in a lot of your rhetoric. And here's the thing about Bloomberg. Bloomberg used to be a Republican, not like back in 1987 or, in 1975, right? No. He was a conservative. He's a Republican since 2007, where he changed to independent. He may have changed his party name or party affiliation, by the way, but it really didn't change all of his policies. And so that's the issue. Now, no one tweeted, I mean, to be fair, Trump is right. Stop and frisk is extraordinarily racist. But, he points out, no one points out, so is a Muslim ban. So are long-term border detention centers. So is calling someone Pocahontas when there's not their name. And ends with the overall point. Bloomberg being racist does not make Trump less racist. And I can't agree with that more. Samuel Morningstar says, peas in a pod, Central Park 5, Bloomberg. Are all rich guys, white guys in New York racist or what? Rob Dufresne says, more from President Projection, who calls other liars, frauds, and dumb. Bloomberg is a total racist. Brad Marchand says, shout out to Trump tweeting and deleting the Bloomberg racist video. He must have realized pretty quickly he can't risk intimating that racism is bad. Well, not when you have someone like Stephen Miller on your team. I'm just saying, Stephen Miller, part of the Trump cabinet, he's one of the guys that, along with, now I seem to forget it, Steve Bannon. I don't know why I blanked on him for a second, but Steve Bannon is a lot like, now I'm blanking out on names today, but the camp of the saints. That is something that they both believe in, right? Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon. I don't know why. Again, I could not remember those names for some reason. I'm blanking out here. But Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon, they both read the Camp of the Saints book. And that book was incredibly racist. And so it doesn't surprise me at all, right, to see Trump tweeting and then deleting this because, oh, oops, I don't want to turn off some of my base. And that's the issue here, right? So now that Bloomberg video, again, that's pretty terrible. But honestly, I don't expect anything differently from a former Republican up to 2007. If you look at the record, the rest of his record, it's pretty bad. I mean, stop and frisk, just harassing minorities, putting all the cops in minority areas so that they would bust people on possession, which is not a violent crime, by the way, and shouldn't be illegal in the first place. You fill prisons with black men. It's just gross. And then you look into what he did with Central Park 5, right? He actually tried to fight them from getting any sort of restitution even after they were exonerated of rape. They were exonerated from the crime. And so he continued to fight to make sure he didn't have to settle with them. You know who else was on that side, on that team? Donald Trump. At that time, Donald Trump was taking out full-page ads calling on the Central Park 5 to be executed. So don't tell me Bloomberg was on the side of the Central Park 5. He was most certainly not. And by the way, Trump, he also said, well, wait, when asked, they were exonerated. What are you talking about? Why should they be executed? Why should they go back to prison? I'm sure they did something. Complete and total racism. And look, that's kind of the mantra of both Trump and Bloomberg. Yeah, look, I'm sure these black people did something. So that's why we're going to put all the cops in those areas. That's why we're going to harass them. We have to push them against a wall, stop and frisk. We have to. That's the way we need to take out crime. I mean, we're dealing with a couple of pretty racist conservative people. The only difference is one of them is running as a Democrat. Yeah. And what's really problematic is that because Bloomberg has so much money and he is blanketing the area with ads. I mean, he's blanketing New Hampshire. He went after Iowa. Now he's rising in the polls. He's at 15% nationally, according to new polls, right? And I personally believe that Bloomberg is there as a foil to Bernie Sanders. And so, and Alik, you probably heard this before, and it doesn't make it any less true. I think that he is there to, again, spend all of this money, blanket all these areas in ads, rise in the polls, and then try to do everything he can to stop Bernie Sanders from becoming the Democratic nominee. Where Joe Biden fails, Mike Bloomberg picks it up. And he's actually gotten a lot more African American support. It's really amazing to see that he's actually risen with African Americans. And I'll detail that in another segment. But overall, on the Bernie point, I think if he loses the nomination, he'll run as an independent in order, again, to stop Bernie Sanders. And I think that at the end of the day, he's going to take a lot of never Bernie people with him. Which, of course, what happened to Blue No Matter Who? What happened to that? I mean, again, it's their mantra. But again, I guess it doesn't matter if it's Bernie Sanders, but that would be, of course, be the complete height of irony, because just like Trump, Bloomberg's a racist billionaire. And the only reason that he's running, the only reason that he doesn't like Bernie Sanders or doesn't want Bernie Sanders to win is because he just wants to pay less in taxes. He doesn't want to pay more in taxes. It's ridiculous. Okay. So let's move on to more details in the Bloomberg story. All right. Billionaire Democratic candidate Michael Bloomberg is being hammered on social media following the unearthing of an old recording showing him defending the policy of stop and frisk. Take a look.
They just keep saying, oh, it's a disproportionate percentage of a particular ethnic group. That may be, but it's not a disproportionate percentage of those who witnesses and victims describe as committing the murder. In that case, incidentally, I think we disproportionately stop whites too much and minorities too little.
All right, so that recording, by the way, I said it was an old recording. It's actually back in 2013. It's just the Trump years have felt like it's been a decade. And so I guess old is relative, but nonetheless, that was back in 2013. Oh, no, white people, they're stopped too often. Minorities, not stopped enough. In fact, if it were up to me, and it wasn't considered unconstitutional to stop and frisk people, I would stop and frisk everyone. Devastating, but by far not the worst of it. So there's actually more recordings. And this is audio that was found online by progressive host Benjamin Dixon. So he gets a lot of credit for this. And this audio was audio that Bloomberg had tried to bury. It is actually from a February 6th, 2015 event hosted by the Aspen Security Institute. So now the Aspen Security Institute invited Bloomberg to talk, and then Bloomberg said, we're not going to release the actual recording of this. I don't want you to release this. And so once you listen to this, you'll understand why.
95% of your murderers and murder victims fit one MO. You can just take the description, Xerox it, and pass it out to all the cops. They are male, minorities, 15 to 25. That's true in New York, it's true in virtually every city. And that's where the real crime is. You've got to get the guns out of the hands of the people that get killed. She's going to want to spend the money, put a lot of cops in the street, put those cops where the crime is, which means in minority neighborhoods. So it's one of the unintended consequences is people say, oh my God, you are arresting kids for marijuana that are all minorities. Yes, that's true. Why? Because we put all the cops in the minority neighborhoods. Yes, that's true. Why do we do it? Because that's where all the crime is. And the way you get the guns out of the kids' hands is to throw them against the wall and frisk them. And then they say, oh, I don't want that. I don't want to get caught, so they don't bring the gun. They may still have a gun, but they leave it at home.
So, wow. Look, that's disastrous, right? And here he is. Again, up to 2015. He finally apologized for stop and frisk right before he started running for election. Oh, well, then everything's fine. All your past statements, including the ones from 2013, 2015, and all the other statements where you defended stop and frisk, all that's completely forgiven because before you started to run your campaign for president, you said, oh, yeah, that stop and frisk thing that I loved and that I defended for years upon years, didn't mean it. My bad, dog. Sorry about that. Please vote for me. Ridiculous. Does anybody actually believe that? If you do, I got a bridge to tell you. But look, now as far as stop and frisk actually goes, do you know how effective it was? Not at all effective. None. Now, this is according to Professor John McDonald of University of Pennsylvania's criminology department, he said in a fact-checking blog that all the evidence collected shows stop and frisk made no difference to crime rates. Quote, NYPD's deployment of extra police to high-crime neighborhoods contributed far more to the crime reduction than the use of stop, question, and frisk. Research on the NYPD's program of Operation Impact found that extra police deployed to high-crime areas in New York was a major factor in the crime decline, a 12% to 15% reduction. The additional use of stop, question, and frisk made almost no difference. The stops only had a detectable impact on crime when the stops were based on probable cause. And these kinds of stops were very rare. McDonald said saturating high crime neighborhoods with extra police helped reduce crime in New York, but the bulk of investigative stops did not play a meaningful role in crime reduction. And yet, Bloomberg was like, oh, no, stop and frisk, up until just recently, stop and frisk works. Oh, it worked great. It worked great. And so, look, again, these are absolutely disastrous videos and should be shared very widely. And again, thanks again to Benjamin Dixon for talking about this, for finding this and spreading this far and wide. Now, the reaction on social media, of course, is very clear. Currently, we have Bloomberg is a racist that is trending. And let me read you some of those tweets. A.W. Hullett says, terrible then and looks even worse now. Tons of people told him stop and frisk don't work, including, as I mentioned, experts in the field. Used to intimidate, harass POC, mostly young men. Bloomberg didn't listen and only apologized at the start of his campaign. Bulldozed his way to the third term as mayor and refused to settle the Central Park 5 lawsuit. That is all information that is true, that is verified, and that is part of Bloomberg's record, which is disastrous. William Haney says, every police department in the nation says it would never racially profile. He's advocating exactly that. He believes that for the greater good, lawful minorities should be subject to greater police scrutiny, bodily frisking, and the use and abuse of state power. Hideous. Look, this guy has the temerity to run as a Democrat. No, this is authoritarian tactics. This is conservative authoritarian tactics. No, not cool at all. Mr. Green says, or has a nickname, Stop and Friskberg. I admit that is kind of good. Sean King, who's an activist, of course, says, if you live in New York or know our history, you've been knowing that Bloomberg is racist. He's awful. The world will soon know just how deep this man's bigotry goes. Another journalist, Frederick Joseph, says, Mike Bloomberg isn't much different than Donald Trump. He has a history of racism, and he's a wealthy white man who decided to buy the election. And that's another problem, of course, because he is, spending tens of millions of dollars, at least, on ad buys in different areas. He's blanketing these ads everywhere, and that, of course, has bought him a lot of polling numbers. I think I read somewhere a math breakdown that he spent about $29 million for each percentage point he's gone up in the polls. That's what it equates to. The hyper targeting and the tens of millions of dollars spent equals now he's at 15% in the polls. That's disastrous. And now earlier, Quinnipiac University released their poll. This is yesterday, actually, showing that 22% of black voters now support Bloomberg. He has surpassed Bernie Sanders just in this one poll, by the way. Just in this one poll. And so I wouldn't get worried about nationally yet. But he's leapfrogged Bernie Sanders in black support. How does that happen when you have this kind of record? Joe Biden still at 27%. And Bernie Sanders at 19%. Now, look, on the Quinnipiac poll, to be fair, it's a really small sample size, about 625 people. But nonetheless, if this starts to translate into national polling with African Americans, disastrous. And I don't see how this is even possible. How is it that somebody with such a racist past and who only up until he started running for election embraced this past and embraced these terrible disastrous, not at all effective policies somehow got 22% of African American support. I'm guessing probably MSNBC, probably mainstream news for not really talking about that at all. And so hopefully now, with independent media talking about this, people will start to hear the truth about Bloomberg and what he really stands for. And hopefully as well, if he's in the Nevada debate, that he gets asked about this, because it's really important, because he needs to be challenged on his history and have his record exposed for everyone to see, because this should not go. Mainstream media is obviously failing us. They're not showing him. They're not showing his real record. Because, look, and this is who he is. He can't deny it, and so someone again has to point that out. And I guess it's up to us. Okay. Anyway, so here's what we're gonna do. So we're gonna take a quick break here. We'll come back. We've got more stories, of course. Stick around. We got Buttigieg staffers going after journalists and people handing out leaflets at Buttigieg rallies. So that's, horrible. And then we've got Chuck Todd comparing Sanders supporters to brown shirts. And then we have Biden trying to lose. Again, the Democratic primary is, I would have to say, disastrous, but also a little bit more entertaining than Donald Trump. And so we'll do that. We'll talk about those stories after the break. Of course, super chats are always welcome. They go to help the show. Patrons, patreon.com/TYT Nation. I'm going to thank a couple of you after we get back, and then we'll continue with the show. So stay right here. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Around the Nation.
nervous, man.
Mike Pounds. Tolerizing.
Welcome back to the show, Around the Nation right here, TWT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Okay, so I of course want to thank some patrons first. I want to thank Alex Kowecki and Andrew Beers. Wouldn't mind having a couple of beers with Andrew. So kind of sounds good, but thank you. Hey, with your help, I can actually afford to do that. No, that money, of course, goes to help continue the show. So thank you so much, Andrew and Alex. You can become a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation. Then I also want to thank some channel members. I want to thank Ibrahim Shabazz and Veronica Wicker. So thank you. If you want to be a channel member, you can hit the join button below. There's other ways that you can support the show as well. For example, there's merchandise over our Teespring. We've got some fun t-shirts. We got an impeach t-shirt, although I guess that's a little bit out of date now. Unless, of course, I am hearing like George Conway is talking about like, hey, you know what we should do? We should impeach the president again. Okay. I mean, if you want to, but maybe we shouldn't. Because it's obvious that he's going to get away with it no matter what. And maybe we should focus on, I don't know, Democratic primaries. But we also have other fun t-shirts as well. And we also have a mug. And so just check it out. There's a link in the description. Okay, so all the ways that you can help the show. And there's super chats as well. So if you have anything you want me to read, because I basically read everything that's in the prompter. No, I'm kidding. I don't have a prompter. But I still love to read your super chats. By the way, have one from Sarge Tech. Just wants to say thanks. Well, thank you, Sarge. I hear your mother's doing well. I saw that in the chat, so that's very, very good. So thank you for the update on that. And I hope she continues to get better. So thank you. All right. Anyway, so let's move on. Let's talk about Buttigieg. Mayor Pete. Doesn't seem to like the press too much. All right. The campaign staff of Mayor Pete Buttigieg don't seem to like the press too much. And they also don't seem to like people handing out leaflets at their rallies. Now, this is Norman Solomon, who's a co-founder and national director of RootsAction.org, was recently at a Buttigieg rally over the weekend, and he was doing what a lot of people do, handing out some literature about Medicare for all. In fact, he was passing out this leaflet that debunked some of the narratives that Pete Buttigieg has been saying about Medicare for all. Now, look, that's perfectly harmless. Again, I see people handing out literature at different rallies all the time. However, the Buttigieg campaign took specific umbrage with this leaflet. Now, he writes, quote, minutes after Pete Buttigieg finished speaking in an auditorium at Keene State College in New Hampshire on Saturday, a Pete for America official confronted me outside the building while I was handing out a flyer with the headline, Medicare for all, not healthcare profiteering for the few. Now, this man came up to Mr. Solomon and said, hey, you can't pass that out. Again, this is literature, right? Now, the man, to show you who's official, was described as having a Pete metal badge in his lapel. And he was telling Mr. Solomon that he was allowed to speak on behalf of the Buttigieg campaign. So that, again, that's important. That's not some rando Pete fan that's getting after this guy and saying, hey, you can't do that. No, this was official, which suggests that this is official campaign policy to stop people from handing out stuff that contradicts what Mayor Pete has been advocating for. Okay, so now Solomon's response was basically, hey, piss off, right? I have the First Amendment. I can hand out whatever I want, right? This is public. This is a public college, right? And so it's not like I'm trespassing on private property. I can be here All I'm doing is just handing out flyers. And so this Buttigieg staffer gets huffy, right? And then walks away. Now, you think that that was the end. But no, in pure Buttigieg fashion, he calls the manager. Except replace manager with campus police. So now, according to Solomon, the staffer quickly returned with a campus policeman. This campus policeman went up and told Solomon that he should stop distributing that leaflet. Don't do it. You're not allowed to. It wasn't just that one campus police officer. Then 2 Keene City police officers had arrived. So just call the manager, right? Hey, you can't do that. I don't like what you're doing right now. So you need to get out of here. Again, it's not as if we haven't seen people handing out literature at rallies 100 times. If you go to rallies, and I've been to a few myself, by the way, there's always somebody passing out some sort of literature, some sort of leaflets, right? And normally I get them from the World Socialist website, right? That's like those people are always at the rallies that I go to. But apparently you can't hand those out at Pete's rallies. According to Solomon's account, the Buttigieg official stood a few feet behind the police officers as they threatened him with arrest for trespassing. Again, this is a public college, Keene State University, paid for by public tax dollars. They still said, no, you're going to be arrested if you don't leave. In fact, he was then ordered to get off the campus within a few minutes or actually be arrested. And to top it off, he was then handed a 1-year ban from Keene State College's entire campus. An entire year. You're booted. Hey, free speech warriors on the right. Hey, you want to talk about people getting uninvited to speak at college campuses? This guy literally got kicked off a college campus for distributing pro-Medicare for all leaflets. Dave Rubin, where are you, Dave? Are you going to talk about this or not? I mean, this is perfect for your show. Oh, that's right. You're not a progressive. You don't actually care at all about policy. No, it's this outrage. And if it doesn't happen to a fellow right-winger, well, then you don't give a crap. So, obviously, the free speech warriors, you're not at all interested in this story. Nobody is, except for actual progressives who actually do care about freedom of speech. Now, again, this is incredibly both ridiculous and un-American. What happened to the freedom of speech? So now, my guess is, and it might sound a little conspiratorial, right? But I think Pete's staff and Pete himself probably has a rule where we're not going to allow this kind of thing because we don't want people to see the reality of Medicare for all. Not only that, but I've heard from 2 people that I do know, 2 reporters. You have host of the Convo Couch, Craig Jardula, and you also have host of Status Quo, Jordan Sheridan, who also alleged to have been basically harassed and bullied by Pete staffers when they're doing interviews of people outside of these Pete rallies. So there are journalists now that are also being harassed by these Pete staffers. And so, look, that's a disaster. Okay. And again, I think it has to do with people in the Buttigieg campaign not wanting to be challenged, not wanting Pete's lies about policy to be challenged by anyone else. Again, Pete Buttigieg, let me point out the lies, right? Pete Buttigieg, he talks about Medicare for all. He says, well, I'm in favor of Medicare for all who want it, right? Now, all that is a public option. That's not actual Medicare for all. So stealing the name is ridiculous, right? But again, that's part of political branding. So, okay, whatever, right? Now, what's interesting about this, right, is that it's a switch in his position that he had a couple of years ago. Back before this, he tweeted this out. I, Pete Buttigieg, politician, do henceforth and forthwith declare, most affirmatively and indubitably unto the ages, that I do favor Medicare for all, as I do favor any measure that would help get all Americans covered. He says, well, I'm in favor of Medicare for all. Well, now he's suddenly not in favor of Medicare for all. In fact, at the recent debates, he's been out there criticizing Bernie Sanders' Medicare for all plan. So come on, dude. Now, the reason that he's changed his position is because of the money. Follow the money, Lebowski, which tells me, of course, that Buttigieg has no core. He tried this progressive hat on for a while, and it was fine. He was getting some votes, but again, he was being beaten by Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. And so not only that, but it didn't pay very well. So he switched. Now he's anti-Medicare for all, pro-public option, which, by the way, public option has numerous issues, mainly that it can be undermined by for-profit insurance companies. And by the way, the flyer points out some of these problems. And actually, you know what? I'm going to read you a part of this, right? Buttigieg is claiming, this is in the flyer, that got this guy, again, banned from a college for a year. Buttigieg is claiming that Medicare for all would dump people off health coverage and deprive them of choice. Those are insurance industry talking points. He's deliberately confusing the current choice of predatory for-profit insurance plans with the genuine full choice of healthcare providers that enhanced Medicare for everyone would offer. That was enough to get this guy kicked out, handing that out at a Buttigieg rally. Look, those are the talking points. And we know, by the way, those are talking points from the insurance industry because, look, the guy who came up with them basically admitted it. Remember, Wendell Potter. Wendell Potter used to work for Cigna as a health insurance industry communications director. So he knows he came up with them. He worked with people like Frank Luntz and the insurance lobbying groups to attack Medicare for all, which is what Pete Buttigieg is using now. In fact, you have Buttigieg, Biden, and Klobuchar all using the same talking points to attack Medicare for all. And they're using these industry talking points. And it's not because they're true. It's because Medicare for all threatens their profit margins. It threatens their very existence. So it doesn't shock me at all that the Buttigieg campaign, which is funded by health insurance executives, health insurance companies, so badly wants to prevent the truth about single payer from getting out to the supporters who maybe if they knew the truth, would no longer support Mayor Pete. This is disastrous. Absolutely a disaster. Okay. All right. Moving on, let's go to Chuck Todd. MSNBC anchor Chuck Todd is facing a lot of backlash for quoting a right-wing columnist, approvingly, I might add, who described online supporters of Bernie Sanders as a, quote, digital brown shirt brigade. Take a look.
There is going to be a huge resentment if some huge pool of money goes elsewhere, if Bloomberg makes a move, if Biden collapses, if there's a Stop Bernie movement. That is going to be to hell will pay with the Bernie people because they are so committed.
Hey, I want to bring up something that Jonathan last put in the Bulwark today, and it was about how, in Ruth, we've all been on the receiving end of the Bernie online brigade. And here's what he says. He says, no other candidate has anything like this sort of digital brown shirt brigade. I mean, except for Donald Trump. The question no one is asking is this. What if you can't win the presidency without an online mob? What if we now live in a world where having a bullying agro-social media army running around, popping anyone who sticks their head up is either an important ingredient for or a critical marker of success?
Wow.
Okay, that's
I know everybody's freaking out about this, but you saw the MAGA rally that's preparing around here. There are people coming from 3 or 4 states on that. That's real, and, you know, this is like Bernie.
This is like Bernie. Basically comparing him to a MAGA rally and comparing them to Nazis. Basically, look, he didn't make that comparison originally, right? So this was, again, Jonathan Last in the Bulwark, but basically he said, well, yeah, I agree with that. I agree with the phrasing. Well, now, wait a minute. There's a way that you could say, hey, look, I have some problems with some of the Bernie Sanders supporters online. they're mean. They sometimes tweet mean things at me. They call me tuck chode or whatever. But I don't agree with the Nazi thing, right? He could have said that. He didn't. It's very important to point out what he did not say. He didn't disavow that language and basically tacitly agreed with it. Look, it's not as if I thought that, MSNBC could get worse. Turns out I was wrong. They got worse. Now they're literally calling people online who support Bernie Sanders, or at least agreeing with other people who are calling online supporters of Bernie Sanders Nazis. That's basically it. Again, digital brown shirt brigade, ironically, of the first Jewish candidate. Chuck Todd, you should be ashamed of yourself. Do you know why, you're getting called out online, Chuck? Do you know? It's because you say things like this. That's why. And it's not just people like Chuck Todd, which, by the way, half of that very panel has said terrible things about Bernie Sanders. Dr. Jason Johnson, he said terrible things. Look, Andrea Mitchell, but by the way, Andrea Mitchell's on that panel, right? Bernie Sanders literally saved Andrea Mitchell from getting ran over by cameramen. Seriously. So, look, you know why that's important? It's because it shows that who Bernie Sanders is. Bernie Sanders is just a good person at heart. And that's part of why we like him. But really, why most Bernie Sanders supporters like him is because of the policy. He has good policy that will help so many people in need. Bernie support, in many cases, and if you really kind of dive into why people support Bernie Sanders, it's not because of, we like his hair and we really like the way that he rolls up his sleeves, which he doesn't do. No, it's policy. And the reason is for a lot of people, these policies are literally the difference between life and death. For example, when it comes to Medicare for all, right? People are literally fighting for their lives, can't afford their health insurance, rationing their insulin, right? Making sure that they can survive, putting off essential surgeries or, treatments, hoping that someday they're going to be able to actually be able to afford to get a treatment on something that could be cancer. It's life or death, right? So now excuse those same people who are either going through that or know someone who's going through that for being just a little bit rude online when they see their candidate getting attacked for ridiculous things, disingenuous attacks. For example, there is that one recent video here that I showed you. I'm going to show you again here. This is Chris Matthews basically saying if Bernie wins, or if the Reds won, if the Soviets won, Bernie Sanders would have been cheering for my execution.
I have my own views of the word socialist, and I'll be glad to share them with you in private. And they go back to the early 1950s. I have an attitude about them. I remember the Cold War. I have an attitude towards Castro. I believe if Castro and the Reds had won the Cold War, there would have been executions in Central Park, and I might have been one of the ones getting executed. And certain other people would be there cheering, okay? So I have a problem with people who took the other side. I don't know who Bernie supports over these years. I don't know what he means by social. 1 week it's Denmark. We're going to be like Denmark. Okay, that's harmless. That's basically a capitalist country with a lot of good social welfare programs. Denmark is harmless.
It's pretty clearly in the Denmark category, yeah.
Are you sure? How do you know? Did he tell you that?
Well, I mean, that's what he says, and that's what his agenda calls for, right?
Yeah.
He's not calling for any...
Let's see. Let's figure that one out.
Well, we haven't seen a campaign yet where video of him praising the other version,
right,
which is Castro, has been used.
Well, but it
will be used.
That's a question
of
how
that plays out.
Of how what the effect that has.
Well, what does he think of Castro? That's a great question. What did you think of Fidel Ismo? We all thought he was great when he first. I think he was cheering like mad for him when he first went in, and then he became a communist and started shooting every one of his enemies.
Complete and utter meltdown. What a ridiculous attack. And look, earlier you had Lawrence O'Donnell, who was talking about how, Bernie's chances in New Hampshire, he lost half of his support. He's literally leading in New Hampshire, and they still find a way to cut him down. Not only that, Joyanne Reid constantly attacks Bernie Sanders. Dr. Jason Johnson, as I mentioned, constantly attacks Sanders, all of them with disingenuous attacks. And you wonder why people online hit back. It's almost as if there's a situation here where there's a bully that keeps punching us in the face. And as soon as we hit back, we are the ones who get in trouble. Because it turns out that bully is connected to his principal's son, right? It's sort of our situation. The mainstream media is so in bed with the political establishment that they're basically one and the same. They enable each other and they help each other. They go hand in glove, right? They attack Bernie Sanders relentlessly, and then they use the resultant backlash that they will get from people online who see these unfair attacks as proof that no, it's the Bernie bros. They're the ones that are bad. They're the online mob. All we're doing is just lying and smearing a candidate that we don't like because we're afraid of our taxes going up. That's all it is. It is absolutely gross. Now, among the first to respond to Chuck Todd was Brianna Joy Gray. Now, she's the national press secretary for Bernie Sanders' campaign. She said, quote, "Digital brown shirt brigade. That's how our Jewish candidate supporters are being described on mainstream media. The contempt shown for ordinary people is really something." And look, that's another angle to this, right? It's another part. These mainstream pundits, it's not as if they're calling like progressive pundits, like people like me, like, oh, you guys are the mob. You guys are garbage, right? You guys are so mean. You're the Bernie bros, right? I honestly don't care what they call me. But it's not just people like me who have careers in progressive media. No, they're calling regular people, regular working class Americans. They're saying these things that you know, they're like the Nazis, right? That's what they're telling everyone else that Bernie supporters are. Again, Bernie supporters are mainly teachers, right? Teachers, people who work at Target, Amazon warehouse workers. Those are the biggest supporters and donators to the Bernie Sanders campaign. Those are the exact same people that Chris Matthews and everyone and Chuck Todd are saying are bullies, are the mean ones. That's what that is. And it is absolutely, completely disgusting. Gross, gross, gross. Now, she also said, I'm sorry, this is Raphael Shimonov, right? Now, he's co-founder of the advocacy group, The Jewish Vote, said, quote, "When Chuck Todd attacked us, including Jews like me with family erased by the Holocaust and pogroms, for being brown shirts, it's bad enough. But the implication also is that Bernie Sanders, whose family was executed by Nazis, is also Hitler." He said Todd should apologize and resign for comparing the first major Jewish candidate for president whose family was executed by Nazis to Hitler. He's right. Now, Florida Democratic congressional candidate Jen Perelman also called Todd's remarks, quote, "indefensible. As a fellow Jew who's aware of half Bernie's family was murdered in the Holocaust, he knows better. We're not Nazis. God, the MSM makes me sick. And we're just getting started." Absolutely right. Now, imagine, like, if that's not bad enough, and she makes a great point. Imagine the explosion of hatred if Bernie Sanders wins New Hampshire and then goes on to get the most delegates in Super Tuesday. It's going to be a complete and full total meltdown. And look, this is based on fear. Maybe because of some mean tweets, right? But I don't think so. More importantly, these people, I think they're afraid that they're going to have to pay more in taxes. I think they're afraid that they're going to lose their jobs, because of the massive media consolidation. That Bernie Sanders would use his antitrust powers to break up these large media conglomerates, and they lose their cushy positions. Or maybe they're just afraid of being wrong. I don't know. Or maybe it's just, again, they don't want to pay more in taxes so that everybody can get health care. I don't know. Maybe to them, that's worse than anything else that they can imagine. But this is all happening. Those considerations are happening all while regular people, us, the 99%, are fighting to maintain, or not maintain, but are fighting to actually get health care, while they're fighting to maintain their privileged positions in media. We're fighting for our lives and to save our society from environmental collapse. So again, excuse me when I say that we've got no time for your goddamn fake civility. Okay. One more story here. Vice President Joe Biden is continuing to prove that he really doesn't want to be president. Now, following a disastrous showing in Iowa, Biden moved to campaigning in New Hampshire, where at a rally, he called a supporter of his, or a potential supporter, potential voter, a lying dog-faced pony soldier. Take a look.
So how do you explain the performance in Iowa, and why should the voters believe that you can win the national election?
It's a good question. Number one, Iowa's a Democratic caucus. You ever been to a caucus? No, you haven't. You're a lying dog-faced pony soldier. You said you were, but now you got to be honest. I'm going to be honest with you. It was a little bit confusing in Iowa.
Not only was it a little confusing in Iowa, I have no idea what you are talking about before. What does that have to do with, oh, you ever been to a caucus? Why does that explain how poorly you did in a caucus? What a weird question. But okay, so now the woman here that asked the question is 21-year-old Georgia College student Madison Moore. Now, Madison Moore talked to the Washington Post afterwards and said that, quote, totally irrelevant whether I've been to a caucus or not, Joe Biden has been performing incredibly poorly in this race. His inability to answer a simple question from a nobody college student like me only exacerbates that reality. Oh, man. Look, man, devastating. Absolutely devastating. Look, all of this is just more evidence that Biden seems to have an inability to be able to talk to people who challenge him. Again, there's plenty of video out there of Joe Biden reacting very poorly to people asking him tough questions. In fact, his answer tends to be, for the most part, go vote for somebody else. Well, I got news for you, Joe. I guess they're taking your advice. Even people who say, well, yeah, well, I'll likely vote for you, but then I'm going to ask you a question on the environment. It's a really important issue to me. So, we should maybe do something about it. To which Joe Biden responds, oh, you want to do something about the environment? Go vote for somebody else. Go vote for Trump. Oh, you want immigration reform? Go vote for Trump. I'm not your guy. Go vote for Bernie Sanders. Why? I think I will, thank you. I mean, come on, dude. Really? He is so going to crash and burn in New Hampshire. Now, he's banking on, of course, winning South Carolina. But again, if you lose Iowa, New Hampshire, if you lose everywhere else, well, then you're not going to do very well anywhere else. So what's the point of winning South Carolina? Unless you're there, of course, just to stop Bernie Sanders. Who knows, right? But as far as the dog-faced pony soldier, what is this? Well, now, Madison Moore, she didn't really care about this, right? She wasn't really fazed by it. But what's strange is that in looking up what it's supposed to mean, or even where it comes from, because it sounds like it could be like a reference, right? Well, that even gets more confusing. So now Biden's campaign press secretary, Remy Yamamoto, tweeted that the comment was just a joke. Oh, no, it's a joke, and it comes from a John Wayne movie. And he has said this many times before on the campaign trail. Now, no wonder a lot of people online had no idea what he meant. Because, I mean, nobody's heard of this. If it's a John Wayne, then mainly, and I guess it makes sense when you look at his support, mainly from, older people, but any younger people are going to be like, what? What? What did you just call me? What are you talking about? And hell, maybe even older people are confused because it turns out that it's not actually a quote from any John Wayne movie. Now, this is according to The Guardian. Biden spokespeople said the line comes from a John Wayne film, but it's not clear it does. There's a 1952 Western called Pony Soldier, but it does not star John Wayne, and no one is called a lying dog-faced pony soldier in it. There is reportedly a line in the film in which a chief says the pony soldier speaks with the tongue of the snake that rattles, swings and roundabouts, dogs and rattlesnakes, I suppose. That's actually not the quote, but the quote ends with the snake that rattles. None of that makes any sense. None of it. What is he talking about? Is the pony soldier a liar? I mean, again, if he speaks with the tongue of the snake, with the rattling, no, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, maybe the reference is that you're a liar. And if you look at the context, then maybe that's exactly what he's saying. Oh, you never been to a caucus. You lie. You lie. Well, okay, best case scenario is that he called that young woman a liar. And maybe it was joking, but look, couldn't really tell at that point. The whole thing is super weird. And the whole thing is super cringe. And maybe, even if you're joking, maybe you shouldn't go around saying that your supporters or people that are at your rallies are lying. I'm just saying, not a good way to talk to potential voters. It's so weird. Okay. Anyway, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Please subscribe. And if you're subscribed and want notifications, you can always hit the bell twice to make sure that you get notifications every time we put up a new video or we go live. So that helps out. Also consider becoming a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. Support the channel or become a channel member by hitting the join button below. Merchandise, of course, always good. Mugs, t-shirts, etc., and all that stuff. So that's all. New Hampshire primary tonight. I hope you guys will be paying attention. I know I will. And hopefully Bernie Sanders will pull out an amazing win. We'll see. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Why? You're getting nervous, man.
Please clap. They're kicking me out the door. They're kicking me out the door.